The exhibition Picasso on Paper explores Picasso's lifelong fascination with paper as a material and the way that it was at the core of some of his boldest experimentation from his childhood through his last studio. And so he used traditional techniques, things like printmaking and drawing, but then he also used paper for things like collages, sculptures, experimental photography. And we can see really clear connections between these works using paper and some of his best known works, some of his most iconic paintings that really defined his career. Cleveland is well known to anyone who has any interest in Picasso for the Cleveland Museum of Art's painting La Vie, which is considered the masterpiece of Picasso's Blue Period. It's an intentionally sort of vague and mysterious composition. Picasso deliberately left the subject up to the viewer's interpretation. And what's really wonderful with this exhibition is that you can see how Picasso really wrestled with the composition. He considered several different groupings of people, considered the subjects in different poses before he settled on the final composition. Many of the transitions in Picasso's biography centered around the women in his life. And so the Rose period followed a moment when he met Fernande Olivier. The summer of 1906, Picasso and Olivier traveled to a village called Gozel. They were both really deeply affected by the sort of ochre tonality there, and Picasso began to incorporate that into his work. Literally the coloration that he was seeing around him, but also, the warmer tone that his life had taken on with a new love interest in it. So within the history of modern art, Cubism is considered one of the most central movements. It was really one of the first movements to challenge the idea of straightforward representation and the idea of objective perception, the idea that an artist's job was to represent something truthfully to the way it appeared in nature. And so instead of doing that sort of straightforward representation, Picasso and another artist who he was working very closely with, Georges Braque, they worked very closely together to break down the subject matter that they were looking at into hinging geometric planes, to look at their subject matter from different angles within the same image, and often to do that by dissolving the subject into geometric shapes like cubes. The works in this gallery all relate to Picasso's painting Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which most artists, art historians today would consider one of, if not the most important painting created in the 20th century. And it was a painting where Picasso really found himself as a cubist and sort of started to work out these ideas that clearly had been circulating in his head and kind of percolating over the course of a year or two. He spent many years working on the painting, and so its final version it depicts 5 women. Their bodies are fragmented into geometric shapes, and this was inspired by Iberian and African sculpture that Picasso was viewing at the time and actually had started to collect himself. One of the reasons that it's especially interesting and controversial that the women are addressing the viewer directly is that they were immediately recognizable at the time as prostitutes. Picasso's original title for the painting was actually The Philosophical Brothel, and he was encouraged to change it because the style of the painting was controversial enough. He eventually settled on Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which referred to a red light district in the city of Barcelona. Collage was really central to Picasso's development of Cubism, and especially once Cubism, for him, entered its sort of second stage, which is called synthetic Cubism. He starts to incorporate found materials into his work, using these found materials in geometric shapes that overlapped and sort of hinged to each other to break down a recognizable subject and give the person looking at it these sort of minimal visual cues so that we can put together what the subject is without straightforwardly depicting it. This gallery is devoted to Picasso's neoclassical period, and one of the things I like about it is I feel like it's really surprising and unexpected for Picasso. It shows a side of Picasso that people might not be aware of or have seen before. Picasso started to create portraits of his friends, other artists, his social circle, and they have this amazing degree of precision to them, this incredibly confident line. And he would actually begin by drawing in graphite, but then erase the graphite and enhance the faint sort of ghost of the line in charcoal. And so they have this precision, but also this sort of boldness to them. One of the great highlights of the exhibition is the collage that you see here, Picasso's Women at Their Toilette. And he created it around 1937. And it was actually originally intended to serve as a design for a tapestry that was not realized until many decades later because he kept the collage in his studio for many years. What the collage depicts is, as usual, the women in his life. We see his wife, Olga Koklova, who was actually one of only 2 women he married during his life, despite the many partners he had. Marie-Thérèse Walter, who was a much younger woman who he had met about a decade earlier and had a long-term relationship with. And then Dora Maar, who was an incredibly accomplished surrealist photographer who was a great influence on his work. We see them in a space that may be the artist's studio with what appears to be a portrait of the artist himself. The later years are, I think, fascinating and surprising for how the sheer quantity of works that Picasso produced. Incredibly prolific bodies of work, just hundreds and hundreds of prints, just trying to preserve his own legacy and think about his own place within art history and the art world.